Incredible claims have surfaced from former National Security Advisor John Bolton. And it is now believed that John Bolton regularly questioned whether Donald Trump was acting in the best interests of the United States. It's an almost unbelievable revelation, but I want to be careful using that language. I've said before, when we say you won't believe the next thing Donald Trump did or the last thing Donald Trump did, it does, in a sense, maybe implicitly foment a lack of belief that this is the real world. So I want to be careful about using those terms. The new battle lines in impeachment, as we've talked about, are: can Donald Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, be trusted? John Bolton says in his upcoming book that Donald Trump personally told him, withhold the military aid to Ukraine until Ukraine announces the smear investigations into Joe Biden. Democrats want John Bolton to testify in Donald Trump's impeachment trial. Republicans seemingly do not. They are smearing John Bolton as a tool of the radical left on Fox Business. That was Lou Dobbs. We played those clips earlier for you. Eventually, probably Friday, the Senate will vote as to whether they are going to call witnesses and whether John Bolton is going to be one of those witnesses. Now, Republicans don't want him to testify, despite saying, hey, we would love some firsthand accounts as part of this impeachment trial. And despite John Bolton being able to provide exactly that, Republicans don't want him to testify. So now it is all about, can we really trust John Bolton to tell the truth? And every single day, this is what they say, by the way, every single day we hear from more from John Bolton, which tells me we have to hear from him in the Senate trial. It is an absolute imperative that we hear from John Bolton. More revelations now from John Bolton's upcoming book reveal that when Bolton was Donald Trump's national security advisor, that relatively brief period, Bolton was regularly appalled, that's a quote, regularly appalled by the behavior of Donald Trump, and that John Bolton sometimes couldn't tell whether Trump was acting based on doing what's best for the United States or on other nefarious goals. Nefarious is Bolton's word, not mine. Let me say it again in other words, because we are all desensitized to the insanity of the political status quo in 2020. The national security advisor of the United States, when he was in that position, would watch the president's actions, would observe the decisions of the president, and doubted or could not tell, is the president acting with the interests of the United States in mind, or does the president have other nefarious interests in mind when he makes these decisions? This is not normal. Even if Bolton was wrong in his assessment, the fact that Bolton couldn't tell in whose interests Donald Trump was acting is in and of itself a scandal. Now, let me be very clear. John Bolton is one of the worst reactionary, right-wing, pro-war neocons of the last 20 years. But I don't believe John Bolton would show up and just lie under oath to the Senate. The way it's being portrayed now by some on the right is that you can't believe this guy, Lou Dobbs, saying he's a tool of the radical left. He's linked to Vindman and Romney and all of these conspiracy theories that Lou Dobbs literally charted out with spider map connections, as I showed you earlier. I don't believe Bolton would show up and lie. Donald Trump is already asserting that John Bolton is simply lying. Donald Trump tweeted in direct contradiction to John Bolton's claim, quote, I never told John Bolton that the aid to Ukraine was tied to investigations into Democrats, including the Bidens. In fact, he never complained about this at the time of his very public termination. That proves nothing, of course. If John Bolton said this, it was only to sell a book. Now, of course, John Bolton may not have said this at the time of his termination because it was not immediately relevant. Now that that is the subject of impeachment, it is not far-fetched to believe that John Bolton is hearing lies being told, recognizes he has knowledge about this, and says, well, no, now I actually have something to add now. I want to show up and I want to testify. We are not dealing with good people when we talk about Donald Trump and John Bolton. But Trump lies endlessly about everything, all the time, including insignificant things. So if you ask me, who do I believe here? I believe John Bolton. And I challenge anyone to make a strong case for why Donald Trump is more believable here than John Bolton. John Bolton, okay, he might want to sell a book, right? That's the motivation. Donald Trump has been impeached, and the entire case arguing against the reason for his impeachment is arguably completely dissolved by the testimony of John Bolton. Bolton might want to sell some books. Okay. Is that going to make John Bolton just show up and lie under oath to the Senate? I don't believe so. Donald Trump has his presidency at stake and is the longtime historically proven liar. Doesn't mean Bolton is anything other than an architect of the Iraq War. But John Bolton was a guy who was the darling of the neocon pro-Iraq war right wing for more than a decade. And because he says, I know I have a story to tell. What's being said publicly isn't true. I will show up and I will tell the story. He is now being trashed by the administration, by Republican officials, by right-wing media like Lou Dobbs on Fox Business, all to try to either prevent him from testifying altogether. If he testifies, make him not believed or appear to be not credible. It's embarrassing. And we are going to continue talking about this, and we will know sooner than later whether we are actually going to hear testimony from John Bolton. I hope that the answer is yes. Let me know what you believe. Do you believe that we will ultimately hear testimony from John Bolton in Donald Trump's Senate impeachment trial? Privacy.com is one of our sponsors, and they're giving you $5 just for using their free service at privacy.com/Pakman. Privacy is a service I've been using for a while now. I love it. It saves me a bunch of headaches. It's completely free, and it's very quick to set up. And here's how it works. When you pay for something online or over the phone, instead of exposing your real credit card number, Privacy lets you generate virtual card numbers. The payments are withdrawn from your checking account, but your real card number stays completely private, and you do it all with one click. You can autofill the card number in your web browser, on the phone. You can create 12 virtual cards a month. You can set spending limits, freeze them, delete them whenever you want. I especially love it for free trials where you need to give a credit card number, because I can destroy the virtual card number as soon as I give it to the company, and I know I won't be charged in the future. If you're ordering food over the phone, why do I need to give a restaurant my real card number if I don't have to? Companies don't have to know who you are. Your real credit card number is protected from the data breaches that happen, unfortunately, more often than we would like, and it's completely free. They do have a paid version with different tiers where you can create more virtual credit card numbers per month, cashback rewards, extra security features. But go ahead and sign up for the free service. It's a no-brainer. Companies can't charge you unexpectedly. You're protected from identity theft. It costs you nothing. And Privacy is giving you $5 to spend just for signing up when you go to privacy.com/Pakman.